Today I have Matt from Strike Anywhere. Matt, I'm just super excited for this. This is gonna be a fun time. Strike Anywhere. I was just talking to you just a minute ago about you have like kind of grown up, or maybe not grown up, but like you definitely are like familiar with a lot of like the Tooth and Nail and Solid State bands that Cullen and I have grown up with, and obviously that's very much the world that Cullen and I we're listening to and have obviously interviewed a lot of those type of bands. So Strike Anywhere wasn't like a band that I necessarily grew up with, but like have definitely encountered later on. And then a mutual friend of ours connected us, and here we are. And I just like Strike Anywhere is kind of one of those bands where I'm like, God, how did I not like hear about you guys earlier? It's just like, like you guys kind of came up around that same time as a lot of the bands that I grew up with, and I'm like,
Yeah.
but obviously a lot of that is you guys were not associated with like the Tooth and Nail scene for the most part, and that's very much the world that my mom was only letting me listen to. So there was only probably so many Strike Anywheres that I was ever going to be able to find when I was 12 years old or whatever. So, but
Yeah.
here we are now. I've listened to you guys, big fan, and I'm just excited to chat with you. So, well, obviously I'll want to talk about we'll want to talk about Strike Anywhere and your history with the band. But before we dive into that, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, just got back from my son's baseball game. They won.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, lovely way to spend an evening. It was a beautiful night out there, sitting with some friends, watching some baseball, so that was good.
Great. I know the band is originally from Virginia. Are you still like in the Virginia area then? Is that a nice night in
Yeah,
Virginia?
so we started, the band started in 1999 in Richmond, Virginia, and me and Garth, our bass player, and Eric, our drummer, went to VCU in Richmond. We kind of just all met kind of, coming up in the punk and hardcore scene around there. And then Thomas, our singer, a few years older, he was in a band called Inquisition before we started, and he already kind of, they had done some touring and, had played lots of shows with like, Avail and, a bunch of the other like bigger bands in the scene. They'd played shows with Hot Water Music, and so we kind of had a little bit of, we had luckily a little bit of some connections from Thomas. Everyone was excited about his new band, but we all came up in the late 90s in Richmond. Like I used to go see Garth, our bass player's old straight edge band, Count Me Out, and I used to see Eric, our drummer's old band, The Exploder, play, and like everyone just knew everyone from around town. And and then like it was one of those things where everyone from different bands just all kind of got together and tried something, and we each kind of brought another person in, and like just somehow it just clicked and started writing songs, and it just kind of fell together like pretty quickly.
Cool. So it definitely feels like a Virginia band, like through and through.
Yeah. So everyone was living in Virginia at the time, and then of course after a handful of years, everyone kind of started to spread out. Yeah. Like so, I was maybe the first to move away. I moved up to Baltimore. I had some buds up there. My buddy Ryan Shelkett, he was in a really awesome band called Cross My Heart on Deep Ellum. And I was like starting to tour a lot with Strike Anywhere, and I'd graduated from school and didn't have anywhere to live, and he offered me a room for like $150 a month or something, and I was like, I'll move up to Baltimore. Dang. So I kind of went up there, hung out with him. We ended up actually starting a band called Liars Academy that was on Equal Vision Records.
Oh, sweet.
And we put out an EP and 2 LPs. And I lived up there for about 10 years, and then after that, I ended up moving down to North Carolina, and now I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina. I've been here for, I don't even know, 15 years or so. So I live here in North Carolina, and Mark, our other guitar player, Eric, our drummer, and Garth all live in Richmond, and Thomas has bounced around. He's been all over the place, but he's in Los Angeles. Currently.
So like the one that's kind of the outlier at this point.
Yeah. So like we just got back from Europe a handful of days ago actually, and like we, the Richmond guys will generally kind of fly together, but I usually just meet them there because I'm flying from North Carolina and Thomas is coming from the West Coast, so we met up over there and usually do like a 1-day kind of rehearsal and run through everything before we start playing shows.
Sweet. You said you're from Wilmington, or you live in Wilmington now. Okay, I gotta ask. Again, obviously, I want to talk about Strike Anywhere, but I gotta ask. One of my favorite comedians in the world right now is Nate Bargatze, and one of his like big. I don't know if you're familiar with Nate at all, but he's like maybe the most well-known comedian at this point. He has like an early bit from years ago, like 7 or 8, maybe 9 years ago, where he talks about going to this reptile place in Wilmington. that I think has since
Yeah.
closed down. I don't think it's open
Yeah,
anymore.
like the Serpentarium maybe
Yeah,
or
the
something?
Serpentarium. That's what it is. And
Yeah.
there's
I have
like
not
this
been there,
like
but yeah.
Google review or Yelp review that's like a 1-star review that is hilarious that he talks about. And the funny thing is like it's this hilarious 1-star review that he happened to be like in, like he was there when the 1-star review experience happened. And I don't know if you've seen that bit or not, but it's all
I have
about that
not, but I'm going to
Serpentarium.
watch it as
Yeah,
soon
like
as
one of the
as soon
snakes
as we
got
hop
out, I
off
guess,
here.
and tried to like attack the children.
So that's your takeaway of Wilmington.
That's the only. That's honestly, that's the one and only thing I know about you all.
Yeah.
Now you're the second.
Yeah.
That you're the second thing I know about Wilmington.
Yeah. It's a fun place. All right, well, cool. I'm definitely gonna check that out. But yeah, it's a great place to live. You know, it's like a smallish to medium-sized city. You know, kind of on the coast. You know, Raleigh's the nearest kind of bigger city. We got Myrtle Beach down the road, but you know, it's not far from Richmond when I get up there to hang with the guys and work on songs and all that. And I still have family up in Virginia, so it's about 4.5 hours for me to get up there. So yeah, it's a great place to live. I live, you know, a couple blocks from the ocean, and
Heck
you know,
yeah.
nice, just pretty chill spot.
Love it. Sweet. Well, let's dive into Strike Anywhere. I know you just kind of like gave like a very brief summary of how it all started, but I can think even like before diving into like how you got into Strike Anywhere, I'd love to hear just like what got you into music. Like, were you listening to
Yeah,
music
sure.
early on as a kid? And you were like
Yeah,
listening to
yeah.
like guitars and punk and all of that, and you're like, I want to do that. I'm just curious, like, what made you like want to get involved in punk music and rock music to begin with?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, my dad had a couple guitars laying around. My parents always listened to music. They were big music fans. And I think it was I don't know, 11 years old, I would say. Maybe 12. I just got interested in the guitars. And like, I you know, that was like, showing my age here, but that was like, you know, kind of like the end of the hair metal stuff, like right before grunge was really popping off. And yeah, I don't know. I just like kind of became obsessed with the guitar. My dad had a couple laying around. I rented a VHS tape from the public library that was like a guitar instructional video. And that's how I learned kind of all the basic chords. And I just kind of taught myself that way. And then kind of learned everything else by ear. I had a couple buddies who played guitar that showed me some stuff. But I just became like completely obsessed with guitar by the time I was about 12.
Right.
And, you know, like every birthday, every Christmas, it was something guitar related, a new amp or a new guitar or a pedal or whatever. Right. And
I'm curious, I like for those that like started guitar, especially at that age, you know, when you're like 10, 11, 12 years old or whatever. I still remember getting my first guitar. Man, I think I was like 10 or 11. I actually got an electric guitar right away. I don't know why my parents let me get an electric before an acoustic, but maybe it's just because like the music I was listening to was like so like I couldn't have ever like imagined playing acoustic at the time, so my parents allowed me to get an electric right away. But I remember I like there was this guy at like my church who he was like a good guitar player, and he was like you know kind of like side hustle like teaching kids how to play guitar. And he, you know, like you would get this like guitar book or whatever, and it was like you literally would play like, you know, one note on like a fret, and it was just like here's the E note, here's the G note, but it like wasn't chords. And I would imagine a lot of that is like because my hands were probably too small to actually make any chords. But I often like think about like it just made me so uninspired to play guitar when I was that age, to just play like one little G note, and I'm like, I just want to play Under Oath. Like, just teach me how to play that. And I understand that there's like kind of basic building blocks to get to that point.
Yeah.
Like I'm aware of that, but there was just something so uninspiring to me that like that's how I first had to learn. And it wasn't until later that I learned how to like start playing some tabs or started learning like basic guitar chords, and I was like, oh, like I can actually play like some of these basic chords, and that like can actually create this song that I actually really like. And that got me way more into guitar than playing some individual notes. But that's interesting that you're like, you know, you're watching this like VHS tape of like probably basic guitar stuff, and you clearly were still into it enough where you probably were learning like basic stuff where you're like, this is not the kind of music I'm listening to, but this is like how you start.
I mean, it was songs that I didn't even know at the time. It was like John, I mean, you know, of course, this tape was like outdated as well because it was from the library, and this was like, I don't even know, very early 90s. So it was probably like it's like a Bruce Springsteen song, and like, you know, Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, and like, you know, I think there was like a John Cougar Mellencamp song or something, and like I was just learning the chord shapes, right? And then after that, and then real quick, my dad, he had this amazing guitar that he got. This is a late '60s Gibson.
Oh wow,
B15,
that's really pretty.
Which is a student model, and you know, it's a pretty entry level Gibson, but it was my dad's.
It looks very basic looking, but I like the wood tone to it. It's like very pretty.
Yeah, and it had a really low profile neck, and like as far as acoustics go, it was a really great guitar to learn on. So I was really lucky to have been able to learn on that. But you know, shortly after that, I was like, I need an electric, and I got one, and you know, but I was like into learning classic rock at the time, and you know, this is kind of before I'd really discovered punk. Like I knew Fugazi and I knew like a couple other kind of things, but it was probably when I was about 13 that some like older buddies, I had some older friends that really just like started turning me on to, you know, some more of the kind of like underground, just deeper cut stuff. And that's, you know, started with like Fugazi and then Minor Threat and Agnostic Front. And at the same time, I was into like early Lemonheads when they were like a punk band. And yeah, just kind of started going down that rabbit hole. And that was, you know, the same time Nirvana was blowing up. And, you know, of course I was into all that as well. And then so I started bands. And I started playing in bands when I was in 8th grade. And, you know, played like the middle school dance talent show thing or whatever, you know, like with like a little 3-piece band where we didn't even have bass players, just 2 guitars and a drummer. And then, you know, by the time I was maybe late freshman high school, sophomore, was just started playing like a 3-piece band, and we would play around town, play the clubhouse in the neighborhood, you know, and like play the battle of the bands and the talent shows and all that, and you know, like little just like friends parties and stuff, and like kind of never really stopped, you know. And I was just I was like this is what I want to do. I want to play music and I want to play in a band. And you know, there's been like maybe like a year or two where I kind of wasn't really active musically, but other than that, I've been active, you know, playing in bands my whole life. So.
Yeah. You're mentioning like kind of this like whole culture, especially existed in the 90s. I'm trying to think if it really existed. I mean, maybe to some degree it existed in the 80s, or maybe it existed in the 80s in its own way. And maybe even like early 2000s it existed, but maybe, I don't know. I think it's like sort of faded off, but like, especially in the 90s, there was this sort of like garage high school rock band culture where like, you know, all these dudes start picking up the guitar and play in their parents' garage, and that's how bands start. And again, like maybe it's just like, maybe that exists, but just in its own different way now. Like maybe that version is like some kid on their computer playing around with like Logic. I don't know what it is, but that has to exist to some degree. Like I don't want to be like old man like yelling at the sky kind of thing, but like it must exist in its own way now. But like what a cool time to have I grew up later on in the night, or I was a kid in the 90s. I grew up more in like the 2000s, early 2010s, but like what a cool time to be a teenager in like human history than like the 1990s, like especially if you're into music. Like what a cool time. Like that's crazy. Like you could just like pick up the guitar and start playing it, and if you get good enough at it, you know, like you could have like a successful career playing that thing. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it was just such like fun, you know, full of hope, inspirational times. And you know, like I grew up in Williamsburg, Virginia, which is like a smaller town outside of, you know, 45 minutes outside of Richmond is where I grew up, to an hour. And I mean, there was like maybe 3 or 4 bands total in the whole town. Wow. You know, like between the multiple high schools. So it's not like today. I mean, there's probably just, you know, so much. I mean, I don't know what's going on with the young kids these days, to be honest. But yeah, it was just such like a fun time. And you know, you go try to get together and record a demo tape on your buddy's 4-track or something, and pass it around to your friends, and you know, just playing like little parties here and there. And I mean, it was super fun. And then you know, kind of kicked around with a bunch of those bands. And then when I really got more into like the hardcore scene, in Richmond. That was in like the late 90s, and played in a couple bands that didn't really go anywhere. And then I started playing in a band. There was a band that I liked a lot called The Exploder that was from Richmond, and they were kind of like first wave screamo kind of emotional hardcore band, like the Ebullition, Gravity Records style bands. And I loved them. I thought they were great. I was a big fan. They were a 3-piece, and I remember seeing them, and at the time Eric, who's now the drummer of Strike Anywhere, was playing drums for him, and I was just like blown away by his drumming. I love that band a lot. And then they hit me up and asked me to play guitar because Eric had left, and the drummer who moved to guitar was moving back over, so there was a guitar slot open. So I started playing with that band, and that was the first band that I ever toured internationally with. We went to Japan, I don't even know, 2000 maybe, and did a tour over there with this amazing Japanese band called Envy. I don't know if you've heard of Envy. Mm-hmm. They're amazing, and the band called 9 Days Wonder. But yeah, like what a crazy experience to be, 20 or 21, and first time really going on tour was in Japan.
Well, I often think about this, especially for artists. At this point, we've interviewed hundreds of artists. There are a lot of them where, especially when it comes to like maybe guitarists or drummers, maybe like the people that aren't like maybe the songwriters, for example. Like, and I'm not saying that like maybe you are a songwriter in the band or not. I don't know, but you mentioned like I think it's Thomas who. Sort of, it sounds like it's maybe sort of again. I have no idea if like Thomas is like the songwriter, but like there's some sort of like leadership that clearly Thomas has within the band. It sounds like, right? And for those that like for the band members that like get sort of introduced maybe later on or like maybe even early on, but like aren't necessarily the leader in the band. When especially if they have experience. With other bands, and then they get like into this fold of this new band where there's this leader within the band. There's something that I've noticed when I talk to them, and this is kind of the question I'm wanting to ask is, there must be something you're identifying in that person where you're like, oh, this is different than the other bands. Like you mentioned just a bit ago, like you were in these other couple of hardcore bands that like weren't, taken off or whatever. And there might be a million different reasons why that was the case. But there must have been something about like once you get into Strike Anywhere and you meet Thomas and maybe some of the other guys in the band and you're like, oh, this has a different feel to it. Like that must be like, I'm trying to like think of like different analogies to that. Yeah. Like I remember like I played high school football. My high school football team was like not great, and fortunately I was like good enough to like get a small little college football scholarship at this tiny little school. Wow. Cool. But even that like school was like really good, even though it was a small little tiny school. And I remember like immediately like my first practice I was like, oh yeah, this is just different than my shitty high school football team. Like I could just tell right away like the way so I'm just curious, like was there just something you knew right away where you're like, oh, this is just different? Like there's a reason why this is going to go international rather than like stay local.
Well, yeah. So like, okay, so that band, I'll try to get through this quick because there's a lot of history. So this band, The Exploder, that I was just talking about, that I had seen Eric, eventually became the drummer for Strike Anywhere playing, and was really impressed by it. The bass player, Dan Evans, from that band, while I was playing The Exploder, was like, hey, I've been jamming with like these other guys, and like we're trying to put together this other band with Thomas, from Inquisition, and I knew a couple songs. I wasn't like, a huge fan, but I'd heard him on some compilations, and I heard some songs, and I remember his voice. I just remember this like huge voice, right? And it was like kind of raspy, but really melodic, and sounded just really kind of like endearing, and just like, just really like honest and rough and great. And then I walk into this practice space to try to like play with this group of guys, and Thomas, he's like this 5'5", like dreadlocked kind of like small dude, and I was like, that's the guy, that's the voice. Like it blew me away that like that was the voice that was coming out of that guy. And yeah, I just remember like hearing him sing, and we're trying to write these songs, and the melodic sensibility, and I was just like, oh wow, like this is gonna be great. And when we started playing, which it came together pretty quick. Like we started playing maybe in like the spring of '99, I want to say, and by the fall we started playing shows. And yeah, I don't know, people just kind of latched onto it quickly. I mean, he's a really, really charismatic guy, and just think the world of him. And like people just listen when he talks, and like generally he has really, really amazing things to say, and like people believe in him, and he can just like kind of uplift the room, and it's been really fun to see. But so very lucky to have been playing with him for, I don't even know, 26, 27 years now. And yeah, it was one of those things where, I mean, obviously, like, we never like made it big or anything like that, but we've had, limited success, and we've been able to kind of continue our career and do like really cool things. We've made tons of friends along the way, and played a couple thousand shows maybe at this point, I don't even know, and just met so many people and traveled the world a ton of times. So I'm grateful for all of it. So the only other kind of like larger scale band that I've done extensive touring with is Census Fail.
Oh yeah.
I think it was in, I don't know, 2010 maybe. I got a call just randomly one day from Jason Black, who's the bass player from Hot Water Music, who at the time was playing in Census Fail, or I think he just sent me a text, and he was like, "Hey, would you have any interest, playing with Census Fail?" And I was actually on tour with Strike Anywhere at the time in Florida, and I was like, "Well, yeah, maybe." And I'd known the band. So there's a producer in Baltimore. His name's Brian McTurnan. He's done Thrice records, Cave In, tons of Hot Water Music records, all of our records. I mean, like his discography is insane of all the amazing bands he's recorded. And I lived in Baltimore, and so whenever the bands would come to town, they would all live at the studio and stay for a month or 2 months.
Right.
And Brian was always like, "We're going to this baseball game, or I'm having a backyard cookout, come hang with the band," because I lived up there and me and him were tight. So I met Census Fail by just like hanging out in his backyard, and we like went to an Orioles game, and I'd come by and hang out at the studio, and I was just the dude that kind of popped in when every band was recording and just like hung out or went out for beers with them or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I knew him a bit from that, and but not well, but I knew Jason pretty well because Strike and Hot Water had toured a bunch, but yeah, they were like, "We need a guitar player. Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Sure." And it was like not even like an audition thing. It was just like, "Well, here's the dates and here's the shows." And so I talked to Strike Anywhere guys, and I was like, "Hey, we were kind of starting to slow down. We had been hitting it like really hard for a long time, and everybody was kind of like burned out and kind of wanted to take a step back." And I was like, "Well, I want to keep touring." So I kind of slid over, and I did that for I think about 6 years. And
with Census Fail?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I did a record called Run a Stair and a record called Pull the Thorns from Your Heart, which is actually like the two really heavy Census Fail albums in their catalog. And but yeah, it was great. Like I'm still great friends with them. I was texting with Buddy the other day, and my good buddy Gavin is still in the band, and me and him played together in that band for years. There's been some like lineup changes down the road, but awesome guys. But yeah, same thing. Like Buddy, super charismatic. He's a showman. And he can kind of have the whole room in like the palm of his hand. And that was another thing when I started playing those shows. I was like, oh wow, like these people are like really into this, and everyone's like really. He's just super engaged with the crowd, and it was just a really fun show. And we got to play some really great shows. I did a couple Warped tours with that band, and it was awesome. And then decided to have a kid and didn't want to tour full time after that. So 2016 I took a step back from that band, still buddies with them, and then Strike Anywhere still does stuff, but we don't tour like we used to. We do we'll do like maybe go to Europe one time a year, and then do like some weekend festival stuff, and then maybe do like a couple week thing on the East Coast or whatever in the fall, but probably down to like maybe 30 or so shows a year.
Yeah, but like I mean that sounds like just super doable to play that many shows. I would imagine like you at probably your peak, you're probably playing close to like 200 shows a year.
More, probably. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, that's like,
yeah, I mean, it was
like
insane.
almost every day of the year. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, we would play a lot of shows. We would definitely play, 200, 250 shows a year.
Wow.
It was a lot. But I mean, when you're 26 or whatever, it's like you can do that. Yeah. Now it's like we just did 10 days in Europe, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go home, man. I'm tired. Like, how did I do this for 8 weeks, 10 weeks at a time? But yeah, but now it's like, when we do it, it's like, it's a reward and it's fun, and like, we genuinely enjoy each other's company in the band. So it's like we get together and it's just like everyone's laughing and making stupid jokes, and like, we have a great time.
And I would imagine, like, at this point, I again, like, I'm assuming a lot here, but I'm imagining that at some point you all like kind of have your own other careers outside of the band. So, like it makes it a little easier where you're able to now, like, you're not doing the band just so that you can put a roof over your head. Now the band is like something where it's like, when it's convenient for all of us, we're able to actually enjoy it and, obviously make a little bit of money from it, or at least break even. But it's something where it's like you were doing this because we actually just enjoy it and not because we have to, put some food on the table.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a big, and we did it as our job, and it was, that was it. We're like, oh, we got to take these tours, we got to fill the schedule, it got to a point, after a while where we were just pounding the pavement and just playing these shows, and we were taking tours that, weren't necessarily like our ideal tours, just to like stay busy, or, like management kind of pushing us to do things outside of our comfort zone because we were trying to get bigger and, experimenting and stuff. And, and at a point we were just like, oh, like this, we don't really feel like we're getting any bigger. Like we don't feel like we fit in on some of these tours that we're on. And it kind of became a job, and it was like exhausting, and, everybody kind of got burnt out. And then that was when like we were like, let's just like chill it out. Let's just do some other stuff, and let's just do the fun stuff and make it more about that. So when it stopped being a job and it started just being like this fun reward that we get to do and still, make a couple bucks, and now it's just like I look forward to it so much.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I love it. And and it's just so fun when we do it now because we don't have to do it. We're doing it because we want to do it, and because we love it, and because we enjoy each other's company, and like people still for some reason care about our band and love the songs, and like, and you see people coming out that have been coming out for 15, 20 years. And you're like, oh, that guy, I remember him. Met him in 2001 at this venue in Leeds or whatever, and like, it's pretty special.
I will say that actually that little point that you just make right there, where you remember the fan, when you're even in Europe, from like 20 years ago or whatever it is. There is something special about the kind of music, the hardcore, underground, punk, whatever you want to call it, like whatever, like that sort of scene of music. When you haven't like transcended to a degree where it's just like it's impossible to almost have any relationship with your fans, like you all are kind of in this like sweet spot where it's like clearly there's like a dedicated following of fans, and yet it's like not transcendent where you're not able to meet those fans again. And so you're kind of in this like cool sweet spot where like, you met that guy like 20 years ago and like you remember him. Like that's a cool thing. And like some artists just get to a point where like that will never be able to be their interaction with fans ever again. And like you all are kind of in this cool little sweet spot where like you get to have that. And there's something I think there's something special about it. I would call it a sweet spot. I would not be I would if I were, and what do I know, but like it's not like I've ever been into that position where like I get to be like a Taylor Swift, but like I can't imagine being like a Taylor Swift and not be able to have like a relationship with my fans if I were Taylor Swift in the way that you all are able to have a relationship with your fans.
Well, like early on, trying to think of an example, like, you show up in a city and you just like run into someone and they're like, you guys are Strike Anywhere, I love your band, like I'm coming to the show tonight, and they'd be like, what are you guys doing? You'd be like, I don't know, we're just walking around. They're like, we're gonna show you around, and you end up like spending 4 hours with this person you never met, and they're showing you around the city, and you're like renting bikes and riding around or going and grabbing beers or touring, like some old like historic site or something, and it's just like crazy. And then it's just this thing where every time you go through town, you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna hang out with this person, then we're gonna go do this time or whatever, and like we just have like, I don't know, 100 or 200 of those people that we've collected over 26 years that we're like, oh, we're probably gonna run into this person when we go to this city, because they're, and then like everyone's, and
some of those people just become really good friends.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. But coming up in like the kind of like DIY coming up in that's just what it was. It's like these people just become your friends, or the guy who booked your house show, like now it's like like my buddy Greg, I hung out with him the other day. He booked a house show for us in like 2001, and we still talk all the time. And met him through like playing in his house.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah,
it's cool. And again, like I would imagine, like I just am not in that like pop world enough, or like any sort of mainstream music enough to like know if that exists. Maybe before as any of those artists go mainstream. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But there is just something really special about an artist just being able to do that. I think it's really cool. Yeah, I think like maybe the closest we have to like an artist that maybe came up in the same way that like you all kind of came up, that now maybe we would describe as like kind of breaking into the mainstream, that maybe has to have like a different relationship with their fans is Turnstile.
Yeah.
Like, they definitely were, they were playing, you're talking about like, living in Baltimore, like they're a Baltimore band, right? Through and through. And, they were probably playing a lot of those like underground
absolutely.
shows that maybe like, some of those venues that you guys have played in. So, they were doing a lot of that for years and years and years, and then only have recently, broken into that mainstream where, again, like I was saying, like maybe they have to have a somewhat different relationship with their fans, especially maybe off stage. Maybe on stage, I think they still like create that like hardcore ethos still, but anyway, like that's kind of like the closest I have, or like the closest I can think of like a band that's in the world that we're kind of in, that has a relationship with their fans in that way, but like is maybe sort of getting to that point where it's like transcending it, where like they can't have it. But because I think a lot of those mainstream bands or mainstream artists, they just kind of initially just get started, or they get so popular so quickly that they never are able to have that kind of relationship with their fans, like again, like you all were able to have.
I love that about Turnstile. It's such like an anomaly for a band to have like been around for so long. I mean, they were around for easily 10 plus years, and like in the hardcore scene, playing like small DIY venues, and like no barricades, and like just it's pretty crazy and cool that they've now become what they are, after just like so much time kind of existing on the same plane, and gradually growing, but then just like, man, it's wild to see what they've done, and like it's really cool. And I know it's like important, and it's like now like they're that band that's like bringing a lot of people in. They're the band that's like like I remember I saw a kid at the skate park. I'm very old and I still skateboard, which is like sometimes I feel like it's foolish, but I love it so much. And I remember seeing like a younger kid with a Turnstile like t-shirt on at the skate park, and I was like, hey, have you ever heard of you ever heard of like Trapped Under Ice? And they were like, no. And I was like, well, you should check it out. And I was like, the singer of Turnstile plays drums in Trapped Under Ice, and like, you might like it. And like, it's just, I mean, that's how I learned about music. Like you had someone older would be like, oh, you like this band that you have this shirt on? Well, like, have you ever heard of this? Like, I remember like, I was into like Fugazi Minor Threat, and this guy was like, oh man, you got to check out Agnostic Front. And he's like, you got to check out Gorilla Biscuits. And like, I was just like, whoa, what are these? And like, you write them down, and like, at those days you didn't have Spotify, so you had to go like, you had to get like a tape off your buddy, or you had to go and like order the CD at the CD store.
Like your friend's older brother was the Spotify back then. Like that was like the fans also, like that was your friend's older brother. That's what Spotify's fans also like was. It was that was
and then
the guy.
Compilations were huge back then. So like you would get like a label compilation, or someone put out some like hardcore compilation, and then you'd be like, whoa, well, who are all these other bands? And like that was, that's how you found out about stuff then. And it was like, it was a pretty cool way to like discover things. And you bought an album, you couldn't just stream it. So like if you didn't love it, you're like, oh, I'm gonna keep listening to this record. I'm gonna make sure that I don't love it, and sometimes you eventually you'd be like, okay, this is great. And then you would read the liner notes. That was the other thing. So like you'd open up the CD booklet or whatever, and you'd see the thanks, and they would thank all these other bands, right? And then you'd write those band names down.
And you're like, well, I gotta listen to
those
bands.
And then you would look them up, and then discover them, and like just kind of like grew exponentially that way. So yeah.
It is cool, and to some degree, like that kind of exists. Obviously, like in different technologies now, but obviously Spotify being a big part of that. But uh, I think one thing, and obviously I want to like keep talking about Strike Anywhere, but you bring up this like really cool point of like you saw like this kid wearing this Turnstile shirt, and like he hadn't heard Trap Under Ice. What I will say about Turnstile that I think a lot of us who maybe are you probably especially feel this way where you're sort of like veteran, like a veteran of like the hardcore world. Like I'm 31 now, and I definitely like feel like I'm the old guy now in that world, especially if you go to like a Turnstile show. They do a really good job, I think, to some degree of like introducing, especially their like dedicated fans to other
Oh
hardcore
yeah, for
bands.
sure.
Like it doesn't seem like they're gatekeepy, or it doesn't seem like they're kind of the type of band where they're not really good at like introducing fans to like other band. Like they don't have that kind of vibe, in my opinion, or at least from what I've seen. And so what's really cool again, like about Turnstiles, especially like some of those older bands that they were really influenced by, some of those bands that like those band members might be in their 40s or 50s now, like really, like 90s bands, that those all those like Turnstile guys grew up with. Like now some of those like young Gen Z fans that like love Turnstile are now going to those like old
Yeah,
shows, like, where they're like watching these guys that were like in their 40s and 50s and were like in their heyday in the 90s. Like it's
yeah.
cool like how that kind of gets passed down. And it's I don't know, there's just something really cool about that within the hardcore scene where there's just this like passing down that continues to happen. And even in those moments where we're like, this feels like this could end at any moment, and it just like, but it keeps happening. Like there's just another band, there's another Turnstile that like kind of pops off, and it kind of like it just hands it down. And there's just something cool about that with hardcore, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's keep talking about Strike Anywhere. Okay, so you talked about just kind of like the heyday, early years. All right, so the last full length album was 2009. You all did release an
Yeah.
EP in 2020, sorry, in 2020. So it's been a few years since there's been new music. It's been a
Yeah.
number of years now since full EP. I'm just curious, like you all are still like playing a number of shows each year. Yeah, just like in terms of just like actually creating music. And I'm not saying that like you have to like spill anything about like new
Yeah.
music or anything, but just for you, like your own, like for maybe even for you personally, Matt, like what is it in terms of like new music that you would love to see from Strike Anywhere, if that's a thing? Like is that
Yeah.
like, would you love to write new music? Is that like a thing that's on the radar? I'm just like curious, like yeah, what in terms of new music, since it's been a hot second, like what
Yeah.
does that
So
look like for you?
funny you should ask. We just recently did just a quick little like kind of long weekend of shows in the Northeast. The first show was in Baltimore. We played the Autobar, one of my favorite venues of all time. And so, we had that weekend on the books, and we hit up Brian McTurnan, who's the producer we've worked with on like the one I was speaking about
Yeah,
earlier. And
that yeah, is the one you're
and
talking about. Yeah.
we hit him up and we were like, hey, we got these three shows we're starting in Baltimore. Like, there any chance you have any open time on your schedule? Maybe we could come in and like maybe we'll just like try to record like one or two songs. Because with Nightmares of the West, the last thing that we released, 2022 or whenever it came out, I don't even know, 2020, who knows? But we just like booked like 5 days or something. Let's just go in and see what we can do. And we're like, man, if we wait to do an LP, who knows when this is going to happen? Let's just go in. So we went in and we just like blasted those songs out, and we spent, less time than we had in the past. We very lucky with a lot of our LPs that we done with Brian, to where we were able to go in for, weeks or a month at a time or whatever, and like really dig into the songs. But that one we did like kind of the quick and dirty recording session, and it came out great, and I love it. But we didn't really get to like dig in deep. It was just like, go in, here's the songs, here's like some demos, let's just get takes, and we did it, and I do love that EP. It came out great. So we hit up Brian recently when we were up there, I don't know, a month, 2 months ago, and we want to do the same thing. We're like, let's just try to get like one or two songs, because the cool thing about this new era of music and like Spotify and everything being the digital age, you can put out a digital single. You can put two songs on Spotify. You could press it as a 7-inch if you want, and then do it digitally.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do an LP. Like you had to back in the day. Oh, we have to have 13 songs or whatever, and it has to be this. So we were like, well, maybe we can go in and just, maybe we can get like one or two songs. We can just throw it up to have something new, and then we can go back and record later, and we can kind of like put together an EP or whatever. But thankfully, Brian, with his wisdom, he was like, what if we just like go in the studio and kind of work on these songs, and like we don't try to just kind of get some stuff recorded real quick and like rush it. He's like, let's just like try to get some really good demos and just kind of dig into the songs. And so we went in. I think we had 5 or 6 that we all kind of collectively. It's like everybody picked 1 or 2, and we went in. I think we had like 3 or 4 days in the studio before we did these shows. And it was crazy. It was just like this creative burst where like all of a sudden we got through the 5 or 6 that we all wanted to work on, and we got like, good quality demos of them. And then we're like, well, what else do we have? And we started going back through, like emails and voice memos, and we started just pulling other stuff out, and kind of all were just like working on it together. And, Brian was putting in some input as well. And like, we left with 11 demos, which I thought we were going to get maybe 6, and we got 11. And like, I still like the songs. I mean, they still need a little bit of TLC, but it was like the most activity we've had creatively as a band since 2009 or, whatever, when we released that LP. So we're like, wow, like we could do a record. So now we're just trying to figure out when we can get back together, because, we live spread out and everyone has jobs and families and stuff. So the hard thing is the time, right? But, this summer, hopefully, I'm not promising anything, but, our plan is to like try to, maybe bring in a couple more and see hopefully if we can do an LP. So, I mean, the plan is to maybe try to do something this summer, So
That's sick. That's
sick.
Sick.
That would be really
I
cool.
think I've heard this from like other bands too, where especially bands that, have been around for 20, maybe 30 years even, is like it's kind of this weird dynamic where, when you're like in your early 20s, you have nothing else going on, like you're able to like pump out a bunch of albums
nothing but
because like
time.
there's you have nothing else but like tour
And
and write and record, right? Like there's just, you have nothing else but time to do
Yeah.
that. But then like once you get into that period of life where like maybe you start having families and like, other jobs and everything, like, and you start getting spread out, like then it just makes it a little bit more difficult to do that part of it.
Yeah.
But the benefit now is like where we are where we're at right now in the day and age is now, like, in your spare time, like you could be writing that riff and you're like, God, that's a really cool riff. Like, let me like now record it really quick on my iPhone. That sounds really cool. And then send that over to my buddies in the band. And then they're like, oh, that like, okay, that's like, I got this drum part that I've been working on that like fits like, and now all of a sudden now like you've got this song that you're writing like between like 2,000 miles apart from each other. And like, so while like there is that like downside of like the fact that you're not able to be in the same room together constantly like you were in your early 20s, there is something to be said about like just the technology makes it way easier than it probably was like 30 years ago.
Absolutely. Like I used to do it. It's back there, but I had an old school cassette recorder, right? And I would like use that, and I would record next to my amp and that, and then I would take that and I would have to like, give the tape to Thomas or something, or I'd have to use it as a reference in the practice space to like remember the part to show it. But so now, I'm in my home office here, and I work from here as well, but I also have like a ton of guitars and amps, and I've got like the Pro Tools rig and all that. So, when I'm taking a break from work, or, it's just a Saturday morning sitting around, I'll grab a guitar and plug in and just try to come up with something. But yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. Just iPhone voice memo. If I can get something where it's like a verse and a chorus part, or just even like a cool breakdown or whatever. And then once I can get it to where it's maybe like a verse and a chorus or a breakdown or a bridge or whatever, just send that over to Thomas, and and then he throws it in GarageBand and he jams on it, and then he'll send back ideas. Sometimes you're like, I don't know, but sometimes you're like, wow, this is really cool. And just one guitar and one vocal, you're like, you can see the potential already. And then based on the strength of that, the whole band kind of like, it's like, oh yeah, that one's going to be good. Or like, let's work on that one first. Or like, I'm really excited about that one. And then when we finally all get in the room together, and so sometimes Thomas is still in LA and I'm in Richmond with the rest of the band, and we're in the practice space getting the music together for the song that, Thomas has a vocal idea for that he was working on in California. So then we'll do like a iPhone full band recording of the song, send it to him, and then he sings over the full band recording in GarageBand. And then
Oh,
and then
that
that
makes, yeah.
becomes the demo that we're like, okay, let's like take this into the studio.
Yeah, I mean that's like basically what the National does. Like the rest of the band records all the music, and then
Oh
like
wow.
Matt Berenger, he starts singing over it. Like from my understanding, actually, the way he comes up with the lyrics is I could be wrong, could be totally wrong. The rumor that I've heard is that like the band will send him like music that they've recorded. He'll put it in his car, and then he'll just drive around for a couple
Nice.
hours and then like sing over it, and that's how he comes up with his
That's
lyrics.
that's that's a great way to do
So
that.
like, I mean, that's essentially what y'all are
Yeah.
doing. Like, and maybe Thomas already has like lyrics written, but like that's essentially what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think sometimes he has, I don't want to speak for him, but I think sometimes he has, a lot of ideas. He's had notebooks of just like kind of lyrics and, themes that he wants to bring in, and so he'll have some stuff that he can kind of tailor to the song, but I'm sure sometimes he just listens to it and he's just writing stuff on the spot that he thinks.
Yep.
So I think it's a combination of both. But
Yep.
but yeah, I mean, there's no better way to do it than just like blasting it in your car and trying to sing or scream along with it.
Yeah. I get it. I get it. I mean, I do that to other people's bands. So, all right. Well, speaking of Thomas, and I definitely want to like dive into like top influential albums for you, but I remember like we were talking about this just a little bit ago. I think maybe even before we were recording, but you find Thomas very inspiring, especially when it comes like obviously Strike Anywhere is a band that like very like Thomas's lyrics are like for the most part very overtly like political in a lot of ways. Talking about lots of different political issues, and yeah, I'm just like you talked about like how Thomas, there's maybe a version of a band or like a vocalist or a lyricist in a band where it's very political, but it's kind of like pessimistic, or it feels like very like you're the
Yeah,
problem, like you
it's
the
like an
listener
angry
are the
dad
problem.
yelling at the
But
crowd. Like
yeah, it's kind of that. But you talk about Thomas like he does it in a very different way, and I don't know, like I'm curious to like hear a little bit more about like what you mean by that, like how you receive Thomas's like very political stance. Like I'm just curious, like yeah,
yeah,
I
just
just
the
find that
the
all
way
really
that
interesting.
the way that he talks about the content of the songs in between the songs. It's just done in like a very kind of like inspirational, like kind of we got this vibe, right? Like it's like, and
Yeah.
and it can start with like a little bit of frustration. And he's yelling, he's mad about it, but then it's like we're gonna do this, we got this, and it's just yeah, I don't know, it's just something about his delivery has just really connected with a lot of people, and it's like he's a pretty unassuming fellow, like he's a smaller guy with a giant voice, and he just kind of emits this aura that people just want to listen to what he has to say, and he does it in a way that like
Hmm. Hmm.
makes a lot of people listen. And like there's so many times that I'll talk to someone or someone will be like, man, I love your band so much, and they'll be like, you guys were the first band that made me like think about these things differently, or like you were the band that kind of
Hmm.
shifted, you know, my thought on some of these like, you know, these issues. And that's just that's it's really cool to hear that, and it's not my lyrics. I'm
Yeah.
not the one up there talking in between songs, but
Right.
we're part of the band and we're all kind of a united front, and it's just really cool to have like been in the back seat watching him do his thing for so long.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it takes like a certain skill set, especially with the kind of like political issues that he's talking about. Like I think there probably is innate this innate tendency to like be pessimistic and kind of just carry that forward. But to be able to talk about those things in a way where it's like, we got this, like we can do this, like we can make this change. That sort of hope and optimism is something that you often don't hear in that world, and so it's really cool when that comes very explicitly forward from somebody. Is like, oh yeah, shit, like I can actually like I can be a part of this. I can be involved in this. Like this can matter to me, and I can like do something about this. And that's a skill set. Like
Oh
not
no,
everybody can do
no,
that.
absolutely
And
not.
the
Yeah.
fact that like Thomas has that ability is like that's important. Like we need that kind of person in the
Oh, for
world.
sure.
So that's really cool, and I love the fact that like even for the band members that have probably heard it for nearly 30 years, like
Yeah.
y'all still y'all. I mean, it sounds like you're still inspired by him in some ways, so that's pretty cool. And you've heard it for almost 30 years.
Oh God, yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So that's cool. I just find that really cool. And yeah, again, like, you know, a lot of the things that he's talked about are things that have become really important for me as well in my own life. And yeah, I just find it really impressive, and like the vibe that I've gotten from him, like you're sort of confirming that for me. Like obviously I've never met Thomas, but like you're confirming that for me, and like that's really cool to me.
Yeah, I was hoping we could have. It was, the time change and everything wasn't possible. I was hoping we could link up while we were over there, so I could get him in on this as well when we were just on tour.
Yeah.
But like 5 hours ahead, and you're at Central Time, so 6 hours ahead. It's just a little challenging.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It is what it is. So cool. Well, yeah, thanks for chatting about the history of the band. Let's dive into your top 5 most influential albums. I know this can be a little bit challenging, but yeah, like the albums that maybe aren't necessarily your favorite, but the albums that maybe have changed you, shaped you as a person. Could be even a Strike Anywhere album if you want.
Okay, just kind of shooting from the hip here. So, right before I kind of got really into the punk and hardcore world, I got super into like, some of the Britpop stuff that was going on, and I just really, really
Oh.
connected with the Smiths so much when I was like a
Oh
young
yeah.
teen, and like maybe like 15, 16, 17, and like they're still one of my favorite bands of all time. And Johnny
Wow.
Marr's guitar playing is just exceptional and like very outside the box and
Yeah.
not really intuitive to the way that I play. But it's taught me a lot about like picking out all the notes in the chord arpeggios, like
Hmm.
how to use these like fuller chord shapes and pick out and ring out strings. And like I've lifted a fair amount of that into my guitar style, which like you wouldn't think would fit
Hmm.
into Strike Anywhere, but like it's a lot of like sad minory chords and like picked
Yeah.
out kind of like a
Do you feel like you got to lean into a little bit more with like Senses Fail, just with the fact that like Senses Fail kind of has a little bit more of this, like, like I don't know, there's kind of like more, I don't know, a little bit more of this kind of emo vibe. I don't know,
yeah, no,
like,
for sure. And like like I think I mentioned it, but maybe we were chatting earlier, but the era of the band that I had played in was like really heavy era, so it's all like drop C,
that's
like
true. That
so.
is
But I
true.
mean, I
Yeah.
played all the other older songs live, but yeah, with Strike Anywhere, like I just tried to channel a little bit of like Johnny Marr's the guitar playing that I love. But so Smith's Louder Than Bombs, which is a compilation record, it's not a real record, but I mean that
Mm.
still is like all time, that's got to be in my top 3, I would say. Let's see. So on the same tip, Billy Bragg. I don't know if you're familiar with Billy Bragg, but he's like a British kind of like
Mm.
a punk adjacent folk kind of singer, and
Okay.
he started in the 80s, and he was kind of like adjacent to the
What
Smiths.
was he sort of like a? I always forget if they were British or not. The Chumbawanga
Yeah,
band.
Chumbawamba, yeah.
Like were they
Yeah,
British?
yeah.
Was he like sort of a precursor to that? Because like when I think of like folk punk, left wing,
Yeah, well,
kind of like I think of
for this,
Chumbawamba.
he's like very much kind of like just like it's just like a one guy with a guitar singing some songs about some
Okay.
important shit and also like some sad shit.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't know. He's just I've just always loved I've always loved him. And that was another one that when I was like coming up into and like really discovering music, Billy Bragg Back to Basics, which is also another compilation of some early EPs. But like that is just
Okay.
absolutely out of the park. Like listen to it thousands of times. It's something I'm always gonna put on. Check it out. Minor Threat discography. I mean, you
Oh,
can't go wrong.
of
Like
course.
they were so young when they wrote and recorded that record, and like just the energy and the anger, and like it doesn't get really any better for me. It's like it's crazy. Like it's
Hmm.
just absolutely perfect and perfectly raw, and like it just I don't know. And like being from the East Coast, they were just up the road in DC, so it kind of like resonated as like they're kind of like a regional band, like it felt like a little sense of like
Hmm.
pride from them being from kind of our area. But yeah, absolutely biggest fan of that. Going a little bit more outside the box with this one, Alice in Chains, Dirt. Absolutely love
Oh,
Alice in Chains.
that's a that's a great pick.
Cantrell's guitar playing is just insane. And I mean, I like their other stuff as well, but like that record, I recently like sought it out and got it on vinyl. I was like, I have to have this. And I just still listen to it and it just gets me fired up. It's just so good.
Wow. Wow, if it's good that Cullen's not on this interview, because if you would have brought up Alice in Chains and we're on video, YouTube would have demonetized our video. I'm just saying, like, that's how much Cullen loves Alice in
Oh,
Chains.
now I'm bummed he's not here.
Any like sort of Soundgarden,
Yeah,
Alice in
yeah.
Chains, like any of that kind of vibe of like 90s grunge, Cullen gets us demonetized, because not just what he says, but what he does on camera that will get us demonetized. So it's good that he's not here.
All right, so that's four, I think. So I got one left.
Yep, one
I'm
more.
gonna go with Kid Dynamite, first album, self-titled. Are you familiar with Kid Dynamite? So they're from
No. All
they're
right, I'm
from
gonna
uh,
look
they're
them
from
up right now too.
Philadelphia. They were on Jade Tree Records, which is the label that Strike Anywhere put out our
Yep,
first
yep,
couple
yep.
LPs on, and like I remember getting their first LP. It was right before Strike Anywhere started, and I love that band so much because at the time I was like pretty into hardcore, and the hardcore world was like really kind of serious, and like that record came out and it was so fun. It was like you took all these amazing elements of punk rock and mixed it with like kind of like youth crew hardcore, and they just blended it up so well into this really melodic, awesome package of these explosive songs that are just ridiculously short.
Hmm.
One song starts, the other one starts immediately. Like, I was like, this is awesome. I was like, I want to play in a band that is like somewhere near this world. And it kind of like inspired me to write some of the riffs and parts that became some of the first Strike Anywhere songs. But like,
Yep.
became friends with those guys, played with them, know them from the other bands, and it was just like became part of the Jade Tree family. But like, I just love that album so much, and it kind of just like inspired me to want to do something similar, and kind
Yeah.
of like put me a little bit onto the path that I'm still somehow on today. So really huge, important record for me. Check it out if you haven't heard it. It's so good, so catchy.
I I'm curious about your experience with this. This might be a longer conversation, so if we need to keep moving forward, that's fine. But I often think about, like, with doing this podcast, I've met so many bands, so many artists that have been so important in my life for a long time. And at some point, I remember maybe early on there was kind of this like starstruckness, but at some point it's just like you meet enough folks where you're just like, all right, yes, you were really important to me, and also like I kind of just like know how to be around you. Like I just like know how to do the like podcast kind of thing. Did like was that like a dynamic that you had to like navigate at some point where you're like, oh my God, like this is a band, even though like they're probably a small band, like in terms of like, what, they're on J Tree, like we might think of like, wow, that's like the biggest band ever, but like they're really not. But like I would imagine, like when you're young, when you're like in your teenage years or whatever, like you're listening to this band, you're like, this is so important to me, and then you meet them for the first time, and then now you become label mates or whatever, and you're like, God, this is so cool. But at some point, like that kind of cools down, if you will. Like I don't know how else to describe it, but
Yeah.
like I don't know, was that an experience for you at all? Like where you're like, oh wow, these are all these bands I love, and now I'm like touring with them, or I'm on
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
label as them, or
Yeah. I
whatever.
mean,
Was that like a thing where you kind of had to like figure out your relationship to them, or like you had to like figure out like how do I be okay, like how do I do this, even though I know for a fact like I would not be a band or I would not be a musician without these
yeah,
guys.
and thankfully, most of my experiences with that are extremely positive, right? Like, you're like, oh man, like
Right,
this, like,
right.
and like some point, you're like, oh man. Like after you get to know people, you're like, ah, that first record, man, it really just like, like you always got to kind of just establish the friendship first, and then you can nerd out about like
Right,
how
right.
important stuff was to you or whatever. But generally, and most of the time, everybody's just super cool and down to earth, especially like in the scene that we're in. And occasionally you'll meet a band, you'll be like, oh, I kind of wish I never met those guys. Like I wish I could have just like
Yeah,
listened
yeah.
to the record. But 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's like you become like buds with
Yeah.
them, and then you're like, oh wow, now like we're buddies with this band that was so important to me, and like,
Yeah.
old friends, and we've had that happen, so long ago. We've maintained these friendships with like awesome bands, but yeah, just luckily most of the bands that I've looked up to as kid, and or records that have been really important to me, I've met the people, and they've just been awesome people, and a lot of them have become friends. Yeah, and it's really cool when that happens, and yeah, and we've also gotten to be that band for other bands
Yeah.
as well, which
Yeah.
is really cool, and like I still meet people all the time, and they're like, man, like you guys such an important band for me, and it really turned me on to like this whole world, or whatever, and
Right.
it's just, yeah, I mean, I don't take that lightly, and I know how it feels from both sides, and it's just like a pretty special thing, and yeah, I just love like this weird world that we're involved in music.
Yeah. That's super cool. So cool. Well, what do you want to plug? So, obviously it sounds like music is on the horizon. It's like I would imagine you all are in early stages where there's
Yeah.
no like definitive date or anything like that, but it sounds like
Yeah.
music is on the horizon. But shows are happening, right? Like you all just were in Europe. I don't know if there's like other upcoming shows, but yeah, like what do you want to plug about Strike Anywhere or anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, so pretty excited. We just announced, I think it was yesterday, we have a fall tour with the Bouncing Souls, who are like really old friends of ours.
Sweet.
We've first toured with them in, I don't even know, 2003 maybe. We did a big tour with them then, and we've become like pretty close, and we've played countless tours and shows with them now over the years. So we've got a tour with them in the fall. It's the Bouncing Souls and Suicide Machines and Strike Anywhere. And the leg that we are on, the opener is this band Human Issue, which I'm excited to check out. But yeah, so that's going to be fun. It's East Coast and Midwest, the leg that we're on of the tour, but it's
Nice.
like a 2-week thing, and really looking forward to that. And then hopefully just kind of like fill in some other kind of festival stuff here and there, and keep working on songs, and yeah, doing our thing.
Love it. Love it. Sweet. Well, I don't know if you'll be in the Twin Cities at all during that Midwest portion, but if you are, would love to see you all. It would be such a fun time. So
Yeah, I can't
yeah, I would
remember
need to look. I
where
haven't
it's
looked yet, but it'd be it'd
But
be a good
yeah,
time.
I think like Chicago or maybe Milwaukee or something is the
Yeah, so
closest. But
there have been a lot more shows in Milwaukee. At least the bands that I really like, they seem to be like Milwaukee or Madison, that have been like kind of the stop between the Chicago Denver stop that happens all the time, or like going down to like Des Moines or something that happens a lot. But I don't know. There's just a lot of bands that are just skipping over Minneapolis over the last year, and I'm like, what's going on here? What's going on?
we've had some fun. We've had some fun ones in Minneapolis. Triple
Yeah.
Rock, we used to play there all the
Yeah,
time. It's the
Minneapolis has got a
best.
great punk scene too. So like, what in the
Yeah.
world?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So cool. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Whether I see you or not, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure lots of folks will love it. So, anything else you'd like to plug, Matt?
No, not really at this time. I do have another fun punk band based out of here in Wilmington called Evening Shadows. We have an
Okay.
LP and we have an EP on Spotify. Check it out.
Ooh.
It's members. There's a band from here in Wilmington called ASG that I like a lot. They're on a label called Relapse, and really good buds of mine. And a couple of those guys play in this band Evening Shadows with me. Now Garth from Strike Anywhere has been playing guitar in that band as well. But we generally just kind of play around here regionally. But yeah, we've got an EP and an LP on Spotify. Check it out.
Nice. Is that guy that owns the Serpentarium or used to own the Serpentarium? Is he in the band by any chance?
No, but yeah, I'll have to look him up.
He
No, my
sounds like
good,
a guy that probably would have lead singer syndrome. So I just figured maybe he was just like the lead singer of the band. But what do I know?
the lead singer of the band is my good buddy Matt Hearn.
He
Who
doesn't own any snakes. He doesn't own any venomous snakes, right?
No venomous snakes. He
Okay.
does
All right.
own our local kind of like punk metal venue here called Reggie's
Of
42nd
course he
Street
does. Of
Tavern.
course he does.
And
Of course.
he's a wild card and a dear friend. But yeah, no snakes.
Wow. You know what? I don't know what that guy from Wilmington that was owning that Serpentorium. I don't know what he's up to these days, but God bless him. And maybe he's in like the competing punk band. Like maybe he's in like that like capitalist punk band or something that you guys have to like rival
Yeah.
against. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm gonna look him up. I'm gonna see what he's up to these days.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for chatting about Strike Anywhere. Just yeah, I love the music that I've listened to so far. Definitely excited to dive more into the discography. And yeah, love the fact that after all these years, you all are still around, still playing shows. I would imagine back in 1999, you probably couldn't have ever envisioned that here you are, almost
Absolutely
30
not.
years later, at least over 25 years later, you're
Absolutely
still
not.
playing shows, and you're traveling Europe, and you're playing the Midwest, and you're playing all around the country, and here you are, you're still doing it. And I think that shows like that the music stands the test of time, and that's like the power of music. And it's just really cool that you're making that kind of music, and your music stands the test of time, and that's the power of it. So it's just really cool.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great chatting with you.